right. So there's not many people up here right now. Hey, what is up, guys? Welcome to Minds Behind the Music. I am your host, LA. Today is a topic that I haven't really touched up upon, at least not in grave detail. I've referenced it a couple of times, and I've, I brought up I've brought up like examples and all that other stuff. But topic today that I'm talking about is influences. Now, what do I mean by influences? What I mean by influences are the the musicians from just any other era, or just musicians being musicians and, inspiring other musicians to play and so forth. Like, for example, Chris Squire to Geddy Lee. Geddy Lee, um, I mean, I don't even think he's openly mentioned it, but he probably has a couple times. Chris Squire was a notable influence in Geddy Lee's playing. Chris Squire from Yes, influencing Geddy Lee from Rush. As if you haven't heard, I would say listen to A Farewell to Kings by Rush, and then listen to Fragile by Yes. You will see the similarities in the way their bass sounds, specifically because I believe they both played a Rickenbacker. I don't think they've played the exact same model, but I could be wrong. They might have both played a 4001. I will have to get back to you guys on that. But Geddy Lee was notably an influence, and Geddy Lee has influenced bassists that came after him and so forth. Like, it's all about musicians inspiring other musicians. It could be any instrument, it could be the things they do, the way that they dressed, the way that they act. It could be a number of different things. Now, I know that a lot of people out there will say that, "Oh, I prefer not to say that I have influences. I don't like to say that I have influences," which is understandable. Like, it, I guess in regards to the like, you could say that you listen to a band that, you haven't listened to. You've only listened to like one album, or even like just 5 songs of that band, and you'd be like, they're not bad. I like these few songs. I haven't listened to them well enough to say that I am a fan, but I really like how they sound, and I might actually dissect how they're doing. I might actually dissect how they sound, and I might learn a few of their songs. What is up, Greg, man behind the mic? How are you doing? I could send the StreamYard again. I believe I sent it to you before, but in case you haven't gotten it, I will send it right here. I hope you're doing well. I hope today's shows went well as well. I know that you got a lot to do because you got a 1K, or a little over 1K with the subs. And if anyone else wants to join, the StreamYard is up. Just know that I sent it via the live, so just keep that in mind. Now, I will have a few people on in a little bit for, just to discuss what they think influences are. But in the meantime, I will go more in depth. Influences aren't just one basis are that you absolutely love and that you look up to, like they're God or something like that, or they're like, the greatest thing since sliced bread to you. It could be how a musician writes his songs. It could be um, their charisma. It could, like I mentioned before, it could be a whole different set of things. It could be the way that they dress, the way that they act. It could even be a guitarist influencing a drummer that writes music, so that they really like the way that this guitarist writes music, and they like, the way that their band sounds. And it could even be that it doesn't have to be the exact same instrument as the player. It could be a number of different things. I think that I know a lot of people will say that influences aren't, like, they don't like to say that they have influences, or they don't like to have influences, but sometimes, more often than not, they will, um when they're like picking up the instrument that, you know, for the reasons of, music that they enjoy, and they enjoy playing music, they want to get into playing music. When they start to really like get to know their instrument, a few of those like trademarks that other musicians have done will latch onto them or will stick with them, and it might be subconsciously incorporated in that musician's sound. Sometimes sometimes it could be more blatant and sometimes not so much. It all depends on how you do it, how you make your instrument sound, and it all depends on like what you're doing on the instrument. But anyways, let's see what we got here. I even have my bass for you guys right here. Oh, dropped my water bottle because I forgot it was in front of my bass. In a little bit, when more people come on, I will show you just what I mean. Like, I'll play a little bit and just to get that second opinion. We should have more people coming on soon. So, anyone that will be watching or watching soon, let your friends know. We'll get those likes up. Anywho, but I could even it could even be say Jaco Pastorius, for example. He didn't have a lot of notable influences that strictly influenced him. I mean, there was a couple of a lot of musicians that came before him, a lot of big time jazz players. I know that a lot of the composers like Charlie Parker and Louis Armstrong, a lot of those. I'm not sure if Louis Armstrong would be a notable influence, but I know Charlie Parker, composition wise, was a big influence on Jocko. Um, the piano I know was one of I know the piano was like a big secondary instrument to Jocko, and that really helped him with his compositions and his songwriting. And a lot of that had to do with, jazz music in general. You could look to, say, some of the greatest drummers of all time, like John Bonham from Led Zeppelin, Neil Peart from Rush. You do the research and you find their roots, and a lot of it had to do with, the big time jazz drummers like Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich. um if anyone can name any of them off, uh if there's any other that I missed, just put it in the comments below. But that's uh that's another one that, um you could really peel that back. I know when I look for, artists that I really enjoy or artists that I love, I see like, hey, what inspired their sound? And it's really interesting. Like, I look at Geddy Lee because he was a favorite of mine, and I know that I look at, what do you call it? Flea had a lot of notable influences too. Greg, man behind the mic, how are you doing, man? Oh,
That was up, man. I'm only gonna be here for a minute because I shut down for the day.
nah, I understand, man. It's good to have you. I just wanted just wanted a second. What is your opinion on influences? Do you I know you're like on the fence, or like you're I think you've openly mentioned that, you prefer not to have, or not to have influencers or anything like that. But what is your take on this whole thing?
I prefer to have my own thing, but I'm not saying excuse me. I'm not saying don't have certain influences. I'm just saying don't let it get to you. Don't let it get to you where you're not making your own stuff. Like the thing about influences is it's supposed to inspire you to make, or at least make you have the will to do it. But if you're just, trying to get inspiration off of people so that you just then sound like that person, it's just going to sound the same. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why people are turned off by having influences, because you look at artists like uh Greta Van Fleet, which, again, this is not to insult them in any way, shape, or form, because I have nothing but respect for that band. I love the way that they sound, and I'm so excited for their new album. It's The Battle at Garden's Gate. It's coming out in April. I'm definitely like I'm definitely looking forward to that, and they're definitely really competent musicians, but when they started out, they wore their influences like they wore their influences on their sleeves.
Yeah. So more or less, it's just I would say, you know, when it comes to influences, don't get too in that mindset of saying, okay, I'm gonna sound like this person. Take what you can, and then from there, what you want to do is make your own sound. Because if you're not making your own sound, it's gonna definitely sound like somebody else, and that's something in which you do not want to do.
Yeah. I completely agree with that, which I think that's why people are turned off by or why certain people don't like to say that they have influences, and that's because, they don't wanna be consistently compared to another artist, or they don't wanna be like a carbon copy of said artist, and it's fair, but again, I look at influences as more of a subconscious thing because whenever I play with my band or whenever I come up with a song with my band, I like look back and I hear how my bass sounds and it's like, I see some resemblances to other artists that I've listened to in the past that maybe like I wouldn't I wasn't intentionally trying to sound similarly to, but it just happens. Like I could hear like I mentioned before, if you listen to Rush and Yes, like the bands Rush and Yes,
Yeah.
or everyone like if you listen to A Farewell to Kings, that specific album by Rush, it came out in 1977. It came out right before Hemispheres and right after 2112.
Hmm.
Um, listen to that and hear the bass on that album and listen to I would say either Fragile or Close to the Edge by Yes, and you hear the bass on that album, and they're both keep in mind they're both Rickenbackers. I think they're both 4001s,
Hmm.
and they sound they sound very similar. Not exactly similar because for one, Geddy Lee's playing with his fingers, and Chris Squire is playing with a pick. So
Hmm.
the instances there are the so there are some differences, but there are some there are some like similarities, like specifically with that like kind of like tinny twang to it, if
Uh-huh.
that's the right way to put it.
Yeah.
Um it's pretty similar, or even in say uh Moving Pictures by Rush, there's some of that sound. It's not exactly the same, like it's starting to, become his own sound, but I can hear a lot of that. And similar to Red Hot Chili Peppers with Flea's playing, or if you see Flea performing live, like actual like footage of Flea performing live with the Chili Peppers, and then you go back and look at live performances of Jaco Pastorius, say with Weather Report or just at jazz festivals, it's actually very, very similar. And maybe it was intentional, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just like it was part of someone's identity,
Mhm.
which that's honestly how influences should be looked at. It shouldn't be like you should have like you will sound like this artist and that's it, and you'll be a carbon copy of that. No, it will be the fact that it will be that this person will contribute to your sound, but you won't sound exactly the same as them. You will have your own identity. Like it will be reminiscent of that, but it won't be exactly like that,
Mhm.
which
Right.
a lot of people what were we gonna say?
No, no, no. I was just agreeing with you.
Uh, oh, okay, but the 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 sound the actual like I said, a lot of people argue, or what I was gonna say, a lot of people will argue that music is just that we're just taking we're taking our own sounds and we're taking sounds from other people and just putting them together and adding our new spin to it,
Mhm.
which a lot of people can argue that's how music came to be. Like say how rock music started, it started with blues and jazz, like people people were just stuck with the blues and jazz sound in the very beginning, and even some of the country, like when you really think about it with certain genres, they're all connected to each other, say R&B, rhythm and blues. which has, it has the blues and jazz influence, but it's also like its own spin. Same thing with rock and country. Say that like like old fashioned rock and roll, like with Chuck Berry, it had a lot of those like blues style sounds, but it also had, you know, it had the old fashioned blues chord progressions, the 1 4 5, and but it was kind of like his own spin to it. It wasn't always the same rhythm as, say, you would hear in a BB King song, or say that you would hear in uh, an old fashioned blues tune from the 20s, like Blind Willie Johnson or Robert Johnson. It would have a different sound to it. Like the song Crossroads by Cream, that's a blatant cover of an old tune, an old blues song by Robert Johnson, but it's Cream. Like it's not just blues, it's psychedelic music, it's just classic rock, or what the boomers would say would be classic rock. Now, Mason is also supposed to be on here in a little bit, so we're just waiting on him.
All right, man. Well, I'm actually very, very tired.
Yeah, that's
You know,
totally
I've
fine.
been working on the clock, thinking of formulas, new ideas, and stuff like that. It's been a hard thing to like maintain 1,000 subscribers and then come up with new ideas for people, stuff like
Yeah.
that. That's what happens when you become the leader of a podcast. Don't get too big too fast.
Yeah, I know how that can be. I was mentioning that earlier, that, you had a lot going on because we're at 1K with Red Sings the Blues.
Yeah, man.
So that's definitely
Yeah,
quite
it's
a
like
task.
yeah, it's like shit. I became the since I became the leader and the spokesperson, it's like all right, now I gotta come up with the ideas. I gotta make sure that we're maintained and all that. So it's like, keeping it all together. But hey, look, listen, I can say that a lot of people that I came across, even though I'm a small person, I'm a small guy in on YouTube. I'm not that big, but you know, I've inspired people to make their own podcast and have their own ideas and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
I guess what
you
I can say is that I'm glad that I can do that.
you could say you were an influence.
Yes, I can say that I was an influence. Just don't try to copy your influences. Try to be your own. Try to
Yeah,
be your
try.
own person when you make your own art. That's what I can say to that. That's my last final thoughts on that.
Yeah, but either ways, thank you for coming on. You were a big help
No
with
problem,
that.
man.
I've I definitely appreciate your take on this whole situation, or this topic.
No problem, man.
Um, and I
No problem.
know,
Glad I can help.
yeah, um, but I know that having a podcast can be difficult. Like I've been having trouble with scheduling on here because I'm doing a lot of stuff in my, regular everyday life. So
Yeah.
coming
Yeah.
up with
Also,
topics and all that can be the big
yeah.
challenge.
Yeah. I just do it daily. I just like an idea that pisses me off. I just go on video and just talk about it.
Yeah,
Got one for tomorrow, and I think I just might record that in my car.
nice. I'm thinking that's usually how I feel. That's what I did with cringe performance of the week, but I was busy risking copyrights. I'm just gonna, if I find something that intrigues me that I want to talk about, or find something that gets mad and makes me think,
The fans deserve better.
then that's a topic I end up talking about. So
Pretty
I
much, man.
completely understand.
Yeah, man. That's
Yeah,
where it is. That's where the money is, man.
yeah. But again, thank you for coming on.
No problem, man. Anything for a friend.
Yeah.
All right.
Anytime. You have a good night.
You too, man.
Don't forget to check out Red Sings the Blues. They're at 1K subs, so definitely keep in mind of that. But on to go further with, influences, it also goes into the genres like I mentioned before, like country, rock, R&B. They're all very similar to each other in regards to what's influenced them, and that being jazz and blues. You could name any genre that's continued, like, I could even start a little timeline. Jazz music was kind of the reject of classical, and kind of that challenge of the common practice period, and that but it maintained some of those common practice period influences and sounds. Then we had blues. I'm not sure which came first. I think jazz and blues are kind of like which came first, the chicken or the egg. But we had blues music, which was very similar to jazz, but not exactly, because it had a sound that helped differentiate between jazz and blues. Blues still had a it still had a common practice period method, like the one like most blues tunes are, they end up being the same kind of chord progression, 1, 4, and 5. And sometimes there's other ones, 1, 6, 4, 5, 1, 5, 4. It goes on and on. And it's 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 very unique how you can see the resemblances. Sometimes blues just relies on a riff, like say Muddy Waters. Most of most of his biggest hits were just followed by a hook or a riff being the hook, and it just him singing, and that's all about the feel. And that's what jazz and blues was really about, the feel. And then a little after that we had rock and roll, and rock and roll became like, it had those blues sounds, but it also had like a country like twang, which country was, blowing up around that time too, because that's when Billboard was really, that's when Billboard started, like the Billboard Hot 100s or Billboard. That's when, singles became the big thing. In the 50s, singles were the big thing of rock and of music, and Billboard was when it started. I'm actually going to look Billboard. Let's actually look in that. When was Billboard created? Uh, oh, it's older than I thought. Let me actually look this up. Yeah, it's older than I thought. Let's have a look. I will share my screen with you guys. Just bear with me. When was Billboard created? November 1st, 1894. Day after Halloween. Dia de los Muertos. Mason, what's up, man?
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. It's perfect you got your guitar out too, because I have my bass out, and that'll help. Oh, I keep knocking
Yeah, I
down my
figured if we
water
were talking about influences, I might as well. It's
Yeah.
better to just play them than try to explain them.
Yeah. We could go back and forth with that.
Hell
But
yeah.
what I was saying, I was actually before you got on, I was just talking about, like, when Billboard started. Billboard the Billboard, what do you call it? The Billboard Hot 100s, or Billboard, the company Billboard, started November 1st, 1894. Or it's a brand technically. Billboard is a brand.
It started in
But
1894.
yeah, I don't think it was first music though. Let me see the first. When was Let's see, when was Billboard music created? That's actually the $1 million question we have. Oh, 1936. But the Hot 100s didn't
Right.
start until mid 1958. Oh, okay. See, on January 4th, 1936, Billboard magazine published its first music hit parade. The first music popularity chart was calculated in July 1940. A variety of song charts followed, which were consolidated into the Hot 100 by mid 1958. Now, why I was talking about that before was because when the Billboard singles started becoming like a big thing, which was like around the 50s, the mid to late 50s, when rock and roll was really getting out there, rock and roll and country, and I think pop music, like that was all being a thing. And which pop music also has some notable blues influence
Wow.
too.
Oh, so they didn't even actually have a.
Oh, what were you saying? Oh, Oh, if what were you saying? Cause you could you repeat that, Mason?
So they didn't even have a Billboard. Like when Chuck Berry came out with his first couple of singles, they didn't even have a Billboard yet. Like that wasn't
Yeah, or
even
they
like
didn't have the
like
Hot
the
100.
right. Huh.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
very interesting to
I
think
didn't know
about.
that.
Yeah, but I guess when you really think about it, is a lot of these genres that were big on the Billboard Hot 100s were big influences towards each other, like rock and roll. Um, rock and roll was like one of the biggest things, which had the notable blues and jazz influence, and it just grew more and more it grew more and more diverse when you really think about it, because in the 60s you had different genres of rock music. You had you had you had regular rock, you had pop rock, you had psychedelic rock, you had hard rock, which started around the mid 60s, I would say the
Hmm.
mid to late 60s, or became popular in the mid to late 60s. And then we had heavy metal music, and then we had progressive rock as well, which both of them started around the late 60s, or so they say, which was one of they said heavy metal and kind of started to become a thing in the late 60s, because
Well, yeah,
and
I
I'm not
think that started because they started calling a Zeppelin heavy metal. Oh
Mhm.
man, they what? I mean, that's kind of funny to
that's
think about that. Like Led Zeppelin at their time was like heavy, like
yeah. And in some cases I guess it's kind of debatable, because when you really think about it, if you really want to go back, we have Helter Skelter by the Beatles, which was classified as one of the first heavy metal tunes. Um, we
right.
had some. I can say Black Sabbath was the first band to call themselves heavy metal, I think, but they weren't the first metal band or the first band to play heavy metal. You had a lot of instances in other groups, like you could say Jimi Hendrix had some metal influence in that, or he influenced a lot of the metal tunes, because I guess in the way that he
Hmm.
experimented with his guitar. Led Zeppelin was one of the early instances, because they had that, like, again, it's all connected with each other because of its influences. Say say Led Zeppelin 1 was a blatant example of their influences. They still had their influences sound. Like, they were strictly that blues, that jazz, and that folk sound.
Oh, for
Like,
sure. I mean, that's why they got called like oh, like right when their first album came out or whatever, they weren't they pinned as a bunch of like copiers, right?
mhm.
Because of their first album, which I find kind of funny because everybody copies them now. Greta
Yeah.
Van Fleet, which
Yeah.
I know I heard you talking about a couple minutes ago.
Yeah, I was talking about Greta Van Fleet because, they were blatantly influenced by Led Zeppelin and uh other Flower Child era rock groups.
Mm.
And they, like, not to say that they're, I'll again mention, they're not to say that they're a bad band, because they're not, but when their influences are blatantly there, it's hard to not point that out. And again,
Right.
Led Zeppelin was also guilty of that, but at the same time, they start to build their own persona. Like, I know in the beginning of Led Zeppelin's career, before they really blew up and became, the band that everyone knows and loves, Led Zeppelin, they were still figuring out their identities. Like, even as well into 1970, they were trying to figure out their identity. Robert Plant, like, if you've seen the Royal Albert Hall performance from 1970,
Oh, yeah, I have.
yeah, they the way that they looked, it was very bluesy, it was very old fashioned. Like if you ever seen BB King perform, like, he had like suits, he had like button down shirts, like that kind of get up.
Well, yeah,
And
I remember there was I forget if it was exactly that show, but like Page would come out wearing well, actually, even into like the late 70s, like he was wearing like I know there's one performance in particular where he's wearing like a suit and a tie. I think it's they were playing like Achilles' Last Stand. I know there's like a famous video on YouTube of them doing it. He's wearing like the blue collared shirt. Like,
Yeah.
hey, that's same thing like BB King came out wearing a suit, or shit, any of them blues guys for that matter.
Yeah, and there was another group like well into like I'd say in the very beginning of certain genres they still wear their influences on their sleeves, like Black Sabbath did. In their first album is very bluesy, it's very jazzy as well. Paranoid was pretty jazzy. Like see if I could play a song without getting copyrighted. Hand of Doom from Paranoid. Like that had like a very kind of like jazzy feel, like and the Yardbirds, they were most notably they had that like blues and country influence to them. Like if you know the song Lost Woman, let's see if I could play a little bit of that. Like that kind of sound to it. And what was it? And right after that, like they had that, that harmonica part, that like it's very country and blues oriented, and it has that like scale, like it goes, because I believe it's in G. Lost Woman's in G, so it goes the and then it goes to, and
Right.
it's just kind of like that. And it's very reminiscent of the older music that came before them and the music that influenced them, but it's like
Actually, it's
like their own sound.
It's
Oh, what are you saying?
It's funny you mentioned Sabbath. That first album, definitely. I mean, it's.
Oh, was it Mason for a second? Hold on, Mason. Your connection your connection might be a little iffy, so there might be some technical difficulties there.
I think I keep losing connection.
It's all good. What were you saying about Sabbath? I could even was like the song NIB from their first album. That riff that Geezer Butler does, that solo, that little intro solo. It's very bluesy, like the way that it sounds, like because he's known for that minor pentatonics, that because that was kind of his whole ordeal. Like Geezer Butler's playing was very much in the E minor pentatonic, or in the pentatonic scales, mostly in E minor. Like in their beginning of their first few records, it was the E minor pentatonic.
Right.
With that chromatic walk, from like that bluesy chromatic walk. And I've heard an interesting fact. I don't know how true this is, so don't quote me on it. I heard when Geezer Butler started playing for Black Sabbath, he was originally a guitar player, but because he grew up with the rest of the other band members, like Tony Iommi, Ozzy Osbourne, and Bill Ward. He was originally a guitar player, but I think he and Tony Iommi, it was either they lost the game of rock, paper, scissors, or coin toss, or it might have just been the fact that Tony knew how to play the guitar better than he did. So he decided that Tony was the guitar player and he decided to be the bass player. But the thing is, why he chose fingerstyle was because he saw Jack Bruce play, and he loved loved the way that Jack Bruce sounded, and
Right.
again, that could count as an influence because Jack Bruce, um, he really set the standard for a lot of the modern rock bass players, or at least the ones that play with their fingers. Like when you really think, like you could
Ah,
probably think of a lot of famous bass players from that came after Jack Bruce, like John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin, Geddy Lee from Rush, Geezer Butler, like I just mentioned. Like they could probably name that Jack Bruce was one of their influences. I mean, the dude really set like the dude had like he probably had a lot of jazz and blues influences that came before him, but at the same time he knew how to find his identity and he knew what made his playing his own while having that respect for those influences. And say for example, I'm gonna play one of our songs. I'll probably play Utba. And what were you gonna say? Oh, can you hear me, Mason? Oh, bear with us, guys. We're just having some technical.
in the realm of Sabbath, it's actually, I think it.
We can hear you now, Mason.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Am I not coming through?
You're coming through a little bit, but you're kind of cutting in and out. All right. Well, wait for him to come back. I know it might have been a signal issue, but when he gets back, I'll talk more about my band or our band's sound and see, what we could pick and choose from each other. And it might be a little biased because we know our influences, like the three of us as a band, we know our influences, so we know like how we're gonna sound. Let me just have a look right here. Oh, unfortunately, just getting some messages from people about the show. Get those likes up, guys, whenever you can. We're just having some technical difficulties, but onto what influences and stuff. Greg Lake from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and a lot of the progressive rock bands, they had a lot of progressive rock kind of puts together that classical music, like common practice period, like composition energy, along with that hard rock, that heavy metal, the blues sound that that people knew and loved from the 50s, 60s, and even the 70s. Mason is back.
Hello. Wait, hold on. Am I better this way? No, definitely not. Better this way.
Yeah, it's better that way. I don't know if there's a way you could change the camera. Unless your phone says you could, but I don't think it can.
Well, yeah, sorry, my computer decided it just wasn't time, so I gotta make do.
It's okay with me. I can still hear you fairly well, so that's sounds good to me.
Hey, I don't think I was coming in at all through my computer. So if I'm coming through right now, that's a big step up.
Now what I was mentioning with before you got back, that I wanted to play a little bit of our band stuff and see like I like just not even like thinking about what we mentioned in like how we wrote the song or what artist influenced us to write the songs. I was wondering if you could like guess any influences just straight from what I'm playing. Like I'll play the one instrumental section from Utba, or Everyone Wants to Be a Hero. We just call it Utba, our band member, because we abbreviated we abbreviated the title into initials because it's a long name. Everyone Wants to Be a Hero, which you guys should check out, by the way. It's on Spotify and Apple Music, so definitely listen to that. But
product pushing. Actually,
Pro-
actually, it's funny. The first time I ever heard anybody refer to it as that was not from you or Nick, but was Paul and Kevin, which is for those listening, is the two guys over at Ashland Audio who are very great at what they do and record us.
Mhm.
And yeah, they I wanted to track the song that day at the studio, and they were like, "All right, we're gonna track Ootba," and I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Yeah, I remember that. Uh, and if anyone's from the area and wants or needs a place to record their music, definitely check them out. They have an Instagram, they have a Facebook. Let me just look up their Instagram so I can write it down for you guys.
Oh yeah, they're awesome.
Um,
They're doing the Lord's work.
yeah, they're phenomenal recording job. We would like to mention as well. They definitely are very, very competent. Audio and shit out. Let me just create the banner.
You're while you're
Instagram.
looking for the Instagram, I wanted to to make the point that I was trying to make for 10 minutes was it's funny that you mentioned Black Sabbath, because I'd say honestly one of my biggest initial influences was that song off of Paranoid, Planet Caravan, right? Shit. Right, very psychedelic.
Mhm.
I like psychedelic music, right? But then he does, it's just a straight up jazz solo that he does at the,
Yeah.
like that is jazz phrasing. And that's what, I mean, initially I was a blues guy. I mean, I only really played blues. But then when I heard that solo, I was like, wow, like I actually like the sound of that. And now I'm a big jazz nerd. So,
And
yeah.
oh, and by the way, check out Instagram at Ashland Audio. If you see it down here, check their stuff out. They definitely great with recording. But as I was or to backtrack from what you were saying, um, one thing I noticed like that Tony Iommi does that takes his influences further is the fact that he keeps the foundation of playing bass for rock music, which is staying in that key or staying in the scale of the chord, which I know old rock tunes would be like which would be like that, but Tony Iommi or sometimes the rock songs would just be straight up and go with the riff, or stay on that root note. Say it's in E minor, and then it goes to like C. Say it would stay on that. What Geezer Butler does in Planet Caravan and a lot of the other Black Sabbath tunes, he will be on the riff sometimes, but he will also do his own thing, and that's one of the best parts. That's one of my favorite things about Planet Caravan. Like, yeah, it sounds formulaic, which can turn a lot of people off, but it could also be a great strength in their playing or in the song, like Planet Caravan. Like, I know during the
Right, he does that iconic.
yeah, and he does that in Paranoid as well, which I hope Warner Brothers doesn't go and take this video down because we're playing it, because I don't know how strict certain bands are when it comes to playing their music.
You know, if anything, that would be a compliment because you played it so well that it sounded like the actual recording and they dug it down.
I guess so. Hold on a second. Sorry, I'm getting blown up on my phone. just mostly memes and stuff. Nick Riccardi, let's say Scream, Sky, play song 2. I don't know what that means.
Oh, song 2. I think it's what's the band? Blur, I think maybe.
Oh, okay. I'm not very familiar with them.
Oh no, it's the meme song. Or it's one of the meme songs. Uh, wait, oh, what is it? Woohoo!
Oh, yeah, I know what that. Yeah, that was a big YouTube meme song. So it was Paralyzed by Finger 11 or Paralyzer by Finger 11. I don't remember. Oh, they play that song to death. I was so tired of hearing it. But back to Black Sabbath. I think Geezer Butler, as an influence, he really set the stage for he really set the standard for playing just being a metal bass player, because he encouraged other bass players to build their own identity and really experiment with the instrument. Like Steve Harris was another big influence of he was another big influence. Steve Harris was another example of Geezer Butler's influence, because he created his own style, which was the Fender Precision bass sound. Like if Running Free, which I hope I don't get taken out for this. Like that, like it sounds reminiscent of Geezer Butler's bass,
Right.
but at the same time, it's Steve Harris's playing. Like you could tell that's another bass player, and I think that's the beauty of having influences. Like it'll sound reminiscent of other players, but it's incorporated into your own style. Like it's part of your identity, which I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this, that bass players don't really bass players don't really or not bass players, musicians and other just genres of music are just other artists influencing each other to sound a certain way. And it's even still happening now, say with Billie Eilish. She's influenced by a lot of the older the older adult contemporary artists, and even some pop artists from the early 2010s, like Justin Bieber. I haven't done a lot of research on her influences, but I know Justin Bieber is one of them. I know she's influenced by a lot of the big adult contemporary pop musicians. But what I wanted to do before I keep rambling on about this kind of thing was I wanted to see, and could have Nick Riccardi down there. I know he's memeing like crazy in the comments section.
I haven't even checked the chat, but I know it's gonna be bad when I click on it.
Oh yeah, it is. He's just going ham. But what I was gonna say is I'll play a little bit of Utba, and I know I'm gonna play a little bit of Everyone Wants to Be a Hero, and I know he's gonna probably say Blood Will Spill, No One Wins, because that's part of the chorus of the song, and I know that's like a meme to him now.
Every time we drop a new song, it becomes a meme in the inner circle of all my friends. Like it will there'll be a phrase like we dropped Skyline of Love, and I forget I think it was just Sky or something. It just becomes a meme, and you know what? I'm okay with that. If we're gonna
okay with it too.
It's what I was born for.
Yeah. Oh, there he goes. Blood will spill.
No one.
And no one will win. That is correct. And let me see if I could I'm gonna play a little bit of the instrumental section, and I want you and Nick to guess. I want you to just have random guesses on what what influences can you hear, or what other bass players can you hear.
Okay.
And we'll see how it goes.
Did it seriously just cut?
Oh, can you see? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
All right. Back to what I was doing. Let me turn down my treble a little bit.
See, I'm biased because I know exactly where you got the do 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 do. Right? Like, you've told me 2 or 3 times where you got that little riff from.
Yeah. I know I got that. I know you're probably gonna be thinking of that, which I did mention before. Other than that, I don't know if you wanna was there any other basis besides that one that you were thinking of when you
Um, I mean, I think it's kind of part of the chorus that definitely a little geezer butlery. I mean, we always get compared to Black Sabbath. Good lord. Um, um, uh, I mean, I mean, come on, let's be honest. I'm biased. I know that it's Steve Harris, and beyond that, it's Geezer Butler. Uh,
yeah, like the chorus part that goes yeah, that riff that we came up with, it I guess it was like reminiscent of like Black Sabbath, and I could say it's a little bit of a because it has that doom metal sound to it. It has like almost a doom metal kind of sound, and I think that was a that was I know a lot of people. I think there was someone that I followed on TikTok. I showed because she would have lives of her covering songs. Yeah,
right.
she would
Yeah.
have lives, and I tipped her to play Everyone Wants to Be a Hero, and she the one of I think the first thing that she said was it was very Rush,
Yeah.
and I part of me could see that, like I could see like the newer Rush or the more later Rush albums like Snakes and Arrows and Clockwork Angels, because I guess we have that more of a modern like 2000s rock sound in Everyone Wants to Be a Hero. Um and uh it's I could sort of see that, and everyone knows I'm a huge Rush fan. I love Geddy Lee. I love like everyone knows how I feel about him as a bass player. So, for it to have that Rush sound is also like very it makes sense. And I know that our drummer Boogie Nick, he's a huge Neil Peart fan, and anyone who knows him knows that he's a huge Neil Peart fan. So that kind of helps strengthen the Rush influence sound.
Right.
Um, what was I gonna say? The one thing I have noticed, the solo that like the part that goes when you solo, it sounds very reminiscent of the Cars.
So funny thing, actually. Um, I mean, you already pretty much know this, but there's the song was influenced by a Cars song called "Bye Bye Love."
Oh no, I don't want to risk getting a copyright strike like Rick Beato did for the Cars.
Oh, good lord. Well, yeah, okay, so then let's just leave it at I won't play the song, but I did get the kind of general, not particularly the rhythm.
Mhm.
Towards the end of the riff, right? The riff goes like this.
Yeah.
And you can hear it when you go. And I got that. I got that from that song, kinda. The inspiration for how I was. I forget how we came up with the Doom thing, but I remember that solo section. I don't really know how we arrived at that either, but I definitely had the idea when I was tracking the solo to keep it very short and sweet and simple, like nothing complex, nothing like show offy, just short, sweet, simple, something that somebody would think of the song and they would hum it. So that's kind of how the car is operated anyway. So I could see why you or anybody else would think that.
Yeah. I hear a little bit of Yes as well. Like I don't know if you've listened to Tales from Topographic Oceans, the first album with Alan White.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, like the song The Revealing Science of God, you know, the album opener. The first solo in it always like I always see, let's see, Nick said you can't get copyrighted if you play 10 or less seconds. I thought it was 3 seconds, but I maybe they changed it. I don't know. Maybe it's I'll have to look at that again. But what was I gonna say? The song The Revealing Science of God, like you know that part. Like it kind of reminds me of that as well because Steve Howe is unbelievable guitarist. Like his playing
Dude,
is out of this world.
there's I've been playing this since I was like 13, right? That ending from Starship Trooper, good lord, that chord, that's actually
I
again
love that chord progression.
the that yeah, it was that song alone, specifically that ending with that fucking. I mean, look at that. Who else in rock plays that? I actually, if I'm being honest, I don't even know what that chord is. but that's like the song that like inspired me to do like voice leading, or like inspired me like, wow, like you can do more than just. And
Yeah, his chord patterns, his chord patterns are just some of the most beautiful that I've ever heard. Like Lou legit sounded like you were playing the bass part. What do you mean when I did the where's that? I forget the root
what?
notes to that. I think they change.
So that's a one flat 6 for.
Ah, okay.
I think he changes between it though, right? He goes like
Lost Transmission by Joy Division.
he does the Freebird progression, but then he modifies it to a flat 6.
Oh yeah. I'm actually not that familiar with Joy Division. I've heard of a couple of their stuff and I really like it, but I'm personally like not as well I will probably one of these days I will like get more into Joy Division. But yeah, legit sounded like you were playing the bass part. Sounds similar to Joy Division, except the bass is a little more aggressive on Lost Transmission. Probably. I'm not that familiar with Joy Division, so if you were to tell me I sounded like that, I probably wouldn't know. I wouldn't be able to recognize it. Good observation. Hello, Michael Bratz. How are you? I take it it's someone else you know, Mason.
Yeah, you met him once actually, or well, actually a few times, but you met him briefly last September. I think we were in practice, and Mike came over. He's the blonde haired.
Yeah, I recognize him.
My boy is in quarantine right now, so I'm glad that we can give him a show.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? I will play before just to spice things up, or
Ooh.
if you could even call it that. When you hear me playing Skyline of Love, at least during the solo section, like the outro, what comes to mind for you? Like what comes to mind for you?
It's very. You're asking like maybe a specific influence?
Yeah, I would say what would you think? Because I know not everyone would first think the influences. They would think the what it sounds like. Some people, I know not a lot of people would read too far into an artist's influence if they don't like care enough to know. But I'm just speaking from like what you would think.
I would probably honestly have to say I definitely hear. I mean, okay, maybe this is minute, but Jack Bruce, just simply because he's always messing around with scale. Although he's more of a almost kind of like a rock blended with an upright bass type deep growl thing. I don't know how to explain, but if I had to choose, my second idea would probably be Geddy Lee. But
I can see where you're going with that. It's like I think this is another way of like I'm just more asking as like what influences would you first hear when you hear someone play, like, and this is more towards the dedicated music listeners like you and I and the people commenting right now, like your boy Mike and your boy Nick. They would like they probably think other people that I wouldn't even think of even mentioning.
yeah, well, yeah, I would definitely. I mean, okay, if I had to pin like maybe someone specific, I guess I'd probably have to go with Jack Bruce, just because. I don't know. How about you tell me? Where did you get inspired from that?
Some of it did have to do with Jack Bruce. Like, Jack Bruce was definitely a notable
Nailed it.
instance. Yeah. Jack Bruce was definitely a notable instance in Skyline because it was a more psychedelic blues song. So I was thinking like it would have that more like classic vintage sound to it. Like I actually didn't record it. I didn't record it with this bass. I recorded it with my other bass, my Yamaha bass, which is downstairs in my basement. Because the Yamaha bass has more of like a vintage tone or a vintage sound, like say something you'd hear, like say, I wouldn't say exactly like this, but say an Epiphone Rivali or a Gibson EB3.
Epiphone ravioli.
Yeah, Epiphone Ravioli. We'll call it that now. But Yeah, like I and very similar to Billy Sheehan in this aspect. I like to have a more like low end kind of sound, but also like have that crunch in my bass playing.
Right.
And it's not always with every song. Sometimes I'm a little more fluid with having that bumpy low end because this is my go-to bass, at least when it comes to playing live. This is my Fender Dimension bass. You can see this is basically my go-to. This is my go-to bass for performing live, and the low end is not the one thing um I overly exert for the tone. I mean, not to say that I don't care about the low end here, because I absolutely love the way the low end sounds on this bass, but I like to have a more like crunchy kind of condensed, compressed kind of tone with this. Which just that kind of sound. Oh, we lost Mason. Let's try to get him again. Mason? Oh, there you are. Oh,
Hello.
we can't. Okay, now I can hear you.
We meet again.
We meet at last.
Sorry.
And
I gotta get a.
What do you say?
I said sorry about that. I gotta get a Wi-Fi extender or something.
Yeah, I have one too, but I think it's just the signal in my area that's acting up. So I get the dilemma. Just oh, I think we lost Mason again. Let's try and get him again after this. Bass in the basement for today. We got Nick Riccardi memeing it up. But until we get Mason back, what I was talking about before is, I guess it all depends on, what I want in the song. Like some songs I like to have more free flow in the tone. Like with Everyone Wants to Be a Hero, I use this bass, and I brought up the mids a lot, so it had like a scooped sound, like a so and I put the bass up a decent amount as well, just so you can have that, you could hear that low end. And I created it where it wasn't like an overcomplicated piece, but it was a bottom to the guitar, and it still had that like driving rhythm that just stays consistent. Like just like you'll hear that low end, but you won't just hear that. And at the same time, I think that's what a lot of modern bass players look for too. I know. Let me see if I can. I would say go to any Yes song on YouTube and search isolated bass for just search isolated bass. Say Starship Trooper isolated bass. It will definitely have its own sound that you wouldn't hear, say, with the rest of the band, but it just adds to it perfectly. Like I hope I won't get copyrighted for this, but just that, like, I know it's not the same exact tone, but I would say go on YouTube and search that. I would love to play it here, but again, I don't want to take these copyright risks. I know I'm already doing that with his playing, but this is just an example. Say Roundabout by Yes. bands that definitely look, it's kind of shows you like both the influence and what shapes the identity of the certain player. Again, you could go to any other band, see like how their bass sounds, like Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, uh, Gene Simmons from Kiss. I notice a lot of resemblances between him and Paul McCartney because they have a similar playing style. Say like Paul McCartney was, Paul McCartney had those like old bass player values, like the keeping the low end, staying on a root note, like 8 days a week. Like it kind of does its own thing, but it stays on those root notes as the guitars. Like Detroit Rock City by Kiss. Just that kind of stuff. You will notice the influences that each bass player has with each other. Gene Simmons from Kiss, you could see the resemblances. I know Paul McCartney did more major scales, at least in the beginning of the Beatles, and while Gene Simmons was known for staying more in the minor scales. In a few of their songs, they did a couple major songs like in the major scale, like Shout It Out Loud. Let's see if I remember Shout It Out Loud. That kind of thing. Again, I would play these songs, but I would have to show you. But I'm taking a big risk on the copyright, so just keep in mind of that. And if and when we get Mason back, he could show us a couple guitar stuff, and that would also be a big help. Before he gets back, I will notice a notable mention with his guitar playing. I did notice a decent amount of Tony Iommi and Clapton in some of his playing with Skyline of Love, at least when he plays the solo. I could say definitely Clapton. What's another? There was it was mostly Clapton that I could hear. Clapton, maybe a little Jimmy Page, but it was definitely more Clapton in his playing. Another example that I hear is when he does those major 7 chords, which I should be able to play for you guys because this is actually my band's music. Let's see why I would get copyrighted for my band's own music, because we all have songwriting creds for this one. Come on, let's play here. Go. Let's hear some of these major 7 chords.
Skyline of love, rise above. Skyline of love, rise above. I've got to maybe drop my.
I would think one song that does come to mind when I hear that, and um this is just me, like, this is actually coming from something that I haven't really talked about with Mason. That would be the guitarist from Free, the one that played on Fire and Water. Let me see. Fire and Water, Free. There we go. Um, who played guitar in Fire and Water? Let's see. Um, Paul Kosov, or Kosov. I don't know how it's pronounced. Paul Kosov. He played the guitar for Fire and Water. He did both the lead and rhythm guitar. Um, I would suggest checking out "Don't Say You Love Me." Uh, I don't know how similar it was. This might be a subconscious thing, but it reminds me a lot of that song, "Don't Say You Love Me." It's in a different time signature. It's in the same key. It's in E major, and he does a lot of. I think he does both a E major and a D major seven, but he doesn't stay on those two chords throughout the song. He he goes to an A major 7, I think, and then he goes to a G sharp 7 or G sharp. It's mostly in 7 chords, and it's like it has that old fashioned, like, bluesy, jazzy sound. It's more blues, but it's definitely, I would say Fire and Water by Free is such an underrated it's an underrated album that I think a lot of people should check out. Fire and Water. Andy Frazier is the bass player of that album, which he is, again, another phenomenal player. Paul Kosov is uh, underrated blues guitarist, and Fire and Water is probably my favorite album by Free. I haven't listened to a lot of Free, but I could say that Paul Kosov was a notable influence in this tune, or I could say it's a little reminiscent of his playing. I think the solo is a little more like Clapton and Page. If and when Mason gets back here, I will mention that as well. I think he's having some technical difficulties with his connection. So if anything changes with that, and we see him again, which I would hope to see him again, um, that the notable influences in Skyline of Love, I would first hear a Clapton. I do, and the weird thing is about this, I didn't know this was actually after we written, recorded, and released Skyline of Love, the song "Don't Say You Love Me." It was the second to last song off Fire and Water, and it was definitely a fine example of the band's competence and Paul Rogers' vocal ability. Like, I think the dynamics were just absolutely perfect, and they were where they needed to be. And I guess this could be another reference recording that. And here's another thing that people don't really talk about. When bands record projects and record albums and EPs, they have reference recordings. Like, you need to have like a band you want to sound similar to, but you need to have a band that not exactly similar to, but you want to have like a similar, like, um energy or sound. Like, you have to say, like when the audio engineers or the mixing guys will say, like, hey, well, how do you want your bass to sound, how do you want your guitar to sound, you could be straight up and say, tell them this song, for example, you want to have like a slap sound. um Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself by Sly and the Family Stone, The Hair by Graham Central Station. It could be stuff like that. I know a lot of bands nowadays. I know in school I had to have you'd have to have a band or artist who's recording an album. You have to give them your references, your reference recordings. Say that you're doing a progressive rock album. You'll just name, say, Kansas, The Point of No Return, Porcupine Tree, Dead Wing, um, Dream Theater's Scenes from a Memory. Um, it could be something even earlier, King Crimson and Court of the Crimson King. These could be records that influence you and might influence what you want your albums to sound like. Yeah, they're not going to sound you. They're not supposed to sound exactly like those records, but they're supposed to have kind of a reference to go off of, to have a similar like energetic or energy to them, to that where no other artist would hear. And that's like, it goes back to the point of, music is just like artists influencing each other. You can't just have um you can't just have this you can't just say like, this is me and this is how I'm going to sound forever, because artists and bands, they go through changes. Like Neil Peart went through some playing changes. Like he had the traditional jazz sticks, the way that he held the sticks. He changed up his playing for that, for the more traditional jazz sound. I think that was more into the late 90s or early 2000s. um Geddy Lee Geddy Lee had a more or the Rush had a sound that was more similar to the Police, in regards to, their last album, the Police's last album. If you hear, I think I mentioned this in the vinyl video with Mike from Retrospin Vinyl. He had They had a more sound reminiscent of the Police on Grace Under Pressure. Distant Early Warning, I noticed that both in the guitar, like from the way the guitar sounded, it had more of like a reggae with a new wave kind of flair to it. And Andy Summers was known for that like bright but like high sound for the guitar chords, and it had like that reggae flair to it. Like just hear the very beginning of Distant Early Warning, which again I'm not going to play because copyright risks. But you'd be surprised what bands influence each other. Jocko, he was labeled as a big influence on Geddy Lee. If you heard the Weather Report song Teen Town, um, some people might not agree with me on this, which I'm honestly okay with, because this is kind of like a bold statement. YYZ, the Rush instrumental for Moving Pictures, the bass solos on that part remind me very much of Teen Town's bass parts. And it's like a very jazzy kind of like descending scale. And I think it's one of the most difficult by Rush to play. But before we get to our final thoughts, let me try and reach Mason again. And this might be just me. I know not a lot of music listeners out there are going to read into a lot of these artists and say like, "Oh, these guys sound very much like another band that I really like, or another band that I look up to." And and they'll always think of that other band. That's not always the case. Hell, when I was like getting into music, I wasn't always like, oh, this band sounds like this band, and this band sounds like this band, and this band sounds like this band. I wasn't always like that, and I'm still not like that. Like, I will listen to a band that I like. Yeah, sometimes I will think about, what influenced them to sound like this, but I will always think about the band that, you know, I'll always think about the band more so with its identity and what they did with their influences, because having these influences are what make you you. Like, you shouldn't, like what Greg said before, you shouldn't try to sound exactly like your influences, but don't be afraid. Don't be too worried with with having a sound that's reminiscent of them, because that's more of a subconscious thing. You're going to have a notable influence in your band's sound. Like, Everyone Wants to Be a Hero, I wasn't aiming for that Geezer Butler sound, but it had a very like Geezer Butler-esque bass line, because I know with Geezer Butler, I could even point out some differences with Geezer Butler. When Geezer Butler plays, it has a more like I know he plays close to the neck, so it would have a sound like this, like see if I can. Here we go. Like he kind of like almost slaps the strings, but he also plays close to the neck. And that's just his sound. I would play near the neck, but not exactly. I'm like in between the neck and the bridge, as you can see. So, and that's more of like, my comfort zone. Like I'm not exactly in my comfort zone when I'm playing near the neck like this. And I'm not always going to be slapping the strings when I'm playing it. Like sometimes I would want to, like, sometimes when it really calls for it, I will be like very like aggressive on the bass, like it would have some aggression when it's called for. And in a lot of Black Sabbath songs, it is called for that aggression, but that style is Geezer Butler's style. That's nobody else's. And but with this other song that with my band Skyline of Love, I would preferably hold back on the when it's just the guitar chords and the drums are like very lightly, when the drums aren't like aggressively like pounding on each other, or when my drummer's just being light and just focusing on other percussion, I would just be like, and I kind of treat playing my instruments as like, a crescendo and a decrescendo and so forth, and a lot of other and when it gets progressively louder, like during the chorus, the skyline of love, rise above, skyline of love, rise above. Like I would like to, be mindful of, how I play rather than the influence that I sound like. It's more of a subconscious thing. If you happen to sound like your influence, it's not always a bad thing. But the thing is, don't ever try to sound like exactly like your influence, because you're only shooting yourself in the foot. I'm just keeping it a buck with you guys. You're only shooting yourself in the foot when you attempt to just sound like your influences. You're not sounding like you. Yes, you are going to have things reminiscent of your influence. Like, I know with the way that I have my bass, it sounds almost like Geezer Butler's P bass, but that's not what I'm trying to sound like. I just have those mids because, that's the tone, that's the like tone choice that I have. Like, if I have my Yamaha bass right here, it would have more of like a bumpy low end, like a. As I just brought down the mids and brought up the bass. Like, and this is not me trying to, sell my product to you, but if you really want an example um, of like how my bass sounds, I would say listen to the original record. I think I could even play it. I would have it because I'm playing a different bass on this song, so I just want to see what we got. Like right here, right here.
Skyline of Love.
It doesn't have a lot of the scooped mids because that was kind of the tone that I was going for. Um, I did use my influences as a reference to how I wanted my bass to sound because I wanted it to have a more vintage sound because it was a more psychedelic, bluesy tune. So it has a more like a boom, 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 like an old fashioned bass from the 60s because that's what I wanted to go for. My Yamaha bass was better with that stronger low end and that like bumpy sound, that boom, 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 boom sound. That's almost percussive. Well, not percussive, but like it's more focused on the low end rather than anything else. My Dimension bass has that like trebly tinny sound that I look for, or that you'd hear in a lot of metal songs or in a lot of metal bass playing, or a lot of metal bass or a lot of that hard rock bass, because I like that more like trebly tinny sound, especially when I'm playing live. And I think I more so developed my hands playing more closer to the neck rather than the bridge, because I keep that low end, but I'm also like keeping that tinny trebly tone that's not overly overbearing. Like let's bring my bass back up. Let's bring the mids back up, and I could show you. I don't have my distortion on, so but say like scream it to the sky. Just that kind of thing. Or like just that. Like you'll like whenever a bass is too, you always got to find your balance, not just in your influences but in your playing as well. This doesn't just go for the bass playing. Let me just put my bass down again. But this does not just go into your bass playing, but this goes into your sound as well. Like yes, your influences will always be there. They're not going anywhere. That's just part of you. Your influences, the point is your influences are part of you, but how you find your sound is up to you. Like yes, you will have your influences, and they're going to be a part of your playing, whether or not you want them to be, or whether or not you will say that they'll be. That's But your influences will always be there. The What matters is the good use of them. And quite honestly, that's how I want to end it. Guys, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Let me just before I, put all the finals, let me just let everyone know. But guys, like, comment, share, and subscribe if you want to see videos similar to this one. Um, I Again, I'm sorry for not being able to upload as much. I've been, I've been having a lot on my plate, just getting everything squared away in the beginning of the month, and it's just all that scheduling issues and all that. But as soon as I get all that figured out, I will have more live shows for you as soon as possible. But before I end things, just for any updates, Instagram, go to my Instagram. I always post on my story. Instagram at LA Perez Works. Was it Instagram at LA Perez Works right here? Just there's no underscores, no dashes, no colons, nothing. LA Perez Works. On if any of you are feeling generous, Cash App $Louis ATM 929. I know it's a goofy name for my Cash App. I don't even remember making that with that name. It was probably a couple of years ago, but if you're feeling awfully generous and you want to contribute to the podcast, and you want to see the equipment that I show you guys, you want to see upgrades and all of that, all of these contributions will go to the podcast, and I will have and do not worry, I will have the receipts for you. And just know that any contribution that you make to my Cash App will go back towards the podcast and towards just everything regarding it, all the equipment. Again, if you guys are from the area, check out Ashland Audio. I recorded with them a bunch of times. They're nothing but phenomenal in the way they record the songs, the way they mix as well. They you would have to talk to them more about their deals. I would say I don't exactly remember how much they charge. You would have to contact them, but definitely check their place out. If you're from the area, if you're from, my state, check out Ashland Audio, Instagram at Ashland Audio. They do excellent jobs of mixing and recording. Very good. Just give them a shout out. I'm just giving them a shout out. And if you're looking to record, record your band, record drums, record anything, or if you just need help mixing, these are some quality guys. Guys, I hope you have a good one. I hope you have a good rest of your week. And as always, stay tuned.